Afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Bushra Ali, and proud to have you here on behalf of Equality, Diversity, Inclusion. There's no one better than the person that we've got who's actually speaking today. So I'm really pleased to have Employability and Mentoring Manager at DMU, Andy Morris. Now, this is a session we've really wanted to put on for quite some time. And Andy, we've tried to do so a couple of times, haven't we? And then we had lockdown. And a lot of people have said that they're either mentoring already and they want to look at how to improve their skills or how to add new skills to their skill set. But I've also come across a lot of people that have said they want to mentor and they want to start mentoring and they haven't already done so, and they would like assistance as to what they should do, what they shouldn't do, particularly those that have already been mentored and have felt that I wasn't really getting much out of it. So really wanting to make sure that we do it well. A lot of people actually don't even realize they're mentoring in their day-to-day life, be it in your household, your children, your family, within your community, your friend circle, and be it at work also. So there's lots of settings that we are mentoring in that we often don't realize anyway. So without further ado, over to Andy to set out housekeeping and we'll move on.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen now. So a massive warm welcome to you all. Bushra, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for setting this up. This is one of a series of events that I know that you're doing across the region to champion equality, diversity and inclusion. It's really important work, and boy, there's a real flavour going around the world right now, isn't there, in terms of diversity and embracing people from different backgrounds, and lots of positivity around that. So we're going to ride that crest of that positive wave as best as we can right now. So it's a warm welcome from me. My name's Andy Morris and I work for De Montfort University, which is a fantastic place to work here in Leicester. And I've been there for about 6.5 years now, running a scheme called Employability Mentoring. I could go into the ins and outs of all sorts of things I might have done in my background, but I suppose I really wanted to reflect on something in that before I came to DMU, whilst I may have been involved in mentoring in perhaps some informal ways, perhaps ways that I didn't recognise, I think I lacked a consciousness of my practice. And whilst I considered myself to be a reflective practitioner, because as an ex-youth worker, we're required to be reflective practitioners, for me, I didn't reflect too heavily on my prior experiences in life. And a lot of that stuff lay hidden and dormant in my mind. A lot of great stuff that I'd been through in the past, a lot of stuff that perhaps wasn't so great, but great experiences that I was failing to revisit. And mentoring and doing the work that I do at the university and with industry and with our students, it's allowed me an opportunity to get stuck into my brain and go back and reflect on and curate a whole range of experiences. What that's done for me as an individual has developed my confidence, has developed my wits, has developed my ability to think quickly on the spot when posed a question about perhaps what I've been through, or how or why and what I've done. And to be able to share that with a level of accuracy in a way that people then have started to come back to me and said, oh, you know, you seem like a wise guy, tell me a bit more. And I'm thinking, me? And nothing changed, nothing massive changed, because I still had all that experience. The main thing that happened is I started to reflect more on my past, and mentoring as a tool provides that. I'll be talking a little bit later about the kind of benefits of mentoring and some of the ins and outs. And we're going to be looking at what good mentoring is and then how do you deliver it. It'll be a kind of a two-parter with a short break in the middle. But I really wanted to share that about how I as a person have been transformed and changed as a consequence of mentoring because of my consciousness of my past and all the goodies and all the hidden treasures and all the things that I've been through that have huge value. But prior to my role at DMU, a lot of that I just wasn't revisiting and I wasn't reflecting on. And if there's something that as a mentor you're required to do, it's to reflect back on the past and understand what you've done and how. And before I tuck in, I'll tell you a little story. It's not my story, it's someone else's story. 2.5 years ago, I was at Manchester University and there was a presentation, there was a number of presentations. It was the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. So people had come from all over Europe. There was people, practitioner mentors, there was coaches, we were in a big room, lots of delegates. And we had some fantastic speakers. And top of the tree was a guy called Mark. He was a doctor. And this is his story, not mine, so I'm not going to claim it. But he was an amazing speaker. He would stand at the front of the room and he had us in the palm of his hand. And he was telling us great stories. He really knew his art. But he told us a particular story about a college tutor that he heard about on the grapevine. And he'd heard about this college tutor whose practice was excellent. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to go and see this college tutor in action. So he set up the visit, he went to the college, he got permission, he stood at the back of the classroom. And sure enough, Dr. Mark, he watched the college tutor, and the guy was amazing. He was controlling the classroom, teaching the curriculum, the students were engaged, it was fun, it was inspiring, you name it. He had them in the palm of his hand. Session ends, students go out, Mark goes up to the front, shakes his hand, he said, I just got one question. He said, how do you do that? And the guy said, I don't know. I don't know. Which is kind of criminal, because if you've got talent like that you can inspire a generation and people hear about you from your reputation, surely you should know what it is that you do and how that you do it. But for this individual, he'd just been so automatic and so good at what he did, he perhaps hadn't reflected, hadn't questioned, hadn't looked back. And if one thing that mentoring does for me as a mentor, it allows me the opportunity to look back, that when faced with an individual that might ask me a question about my experiences, I can look back through 44 years of my life so far, 40 of them pretty much conscious, and as a consequence, filter a range of experiences that I can impart and I can share. So by way of an introduction, yes, I could give you my CV or whatever, and you could learn about that on LinkedIn, but actually the power of mentoring, well, I've seen it for myself, because it has encouraged me to reflect on my past and see the value of what I bring to someone else's life. So, by way of a welcome, that's a little bit about me, and hopefully that demonstrates some of my passion, my enthusiasm for this. And what I'll be doing throughout this presentation is trying to break down, rather like the guy couldn't say to Dr. Mark, I'm going to try and break down what it is that I do and how, so you can get an understanding of how I see mentoring. However, before I get into that, one more thing. As I say to any student that I will mentor, anyone that I engage with, you can take everything I can say today and you can put it in the bin on the way out if you want to. Because I'm not so kind of, and it's a lovely introduction from Bushra, don't get me right, but this is not one of those presentations where I'll be quoting Gibbs or Mark or whoever, and that was some elaborate references. These are my musings and the things that I've learned and reflected on over a period of time. And just because it's right for me might not mean it's right for you. But perhaps somewhere in the discussion points that we'll have along the way, we can come to a better sense of understanding for ourselves over what mentoring might be, and maybe something I'll say is a value, maybe it won't be, but we'll see. You'll be the judge of that, not me. And then of course I'll take feedback on the end. Okay, so let's move on. Housekeeping. Right, sorry, this is my sense of humour. There will be some strange images on the screen. You're thinking, what the hell is he talking about? So I'm hoping that technology won't let us down today. So if you've all got your microphones off, that will certainly help. If you want to switch your cameras off so I can't see you, all I can see is my screen and a list of names, that's certainly going to improve the quality of the signal so that I can make sure I can present to you. So feel free to do that. It's lovely to see your faces, of course, but the key information is on the screen. Part of the way through the presentation, after the slide where I'll talk about some of the challenges involved in good mentoring, there'll be a picture of a cup of tea, a red cuppa. Now at that point, that's your cue to perhaps go and stretch your legs if you need to the toilet, get yourself a cup of tea, whatever it is that you want to do. But if you want to stay online, perhaps we can unmute the microphones and then we can have a discussion, and perhaps there's some questions that you might want to raise. Now, I'm not particularly going to be keeping a heavy note on the chat bar. There are questions, you can put them in there and I'll visit them later. Or of course you can write them down in a pen and pad. And I'll do my best to answer your questions. I'm a very honest guy. If there's something I don't know, I'm just going to say to you straight, I'm sorry, I don't know that. I might try and figure it out on the spot, but I'll tell you that's what I'm trying to do. And of course, with a quality range of people, and I do know some of the names here, we've got a great breadth of experience here. Perhaps other people are going to have their viewpoints on the questions that are fielded. So that's when we see the cup of tea image a little bit later on. And then right at the end, you'll see a hands up image on one of the final slides, and that's an opportunity for a final Q&A at the end of the session. So take it that you are happy with that, and we will move on from there. What is this session and who is it for? We'll put a bit of brief about that on the next slide in terms of who it's ideally aimed at. You know, whether you're kind of thinking about mentoring, you're already using mentoring, you want to develop your own mentoring practice. But I suppose I've got a question for you right now. Why are you here today? And then what is it that you want to leave with at the end? Yeah. So why are you here? And what do you want to leave with? I want to encourage you to think about that, because I've got a list of the names yesterday from Bushra, and she let me know who was coming along. But because I don't know you in great detail and I haven't asked you about your particular motive, I won't know what your reason was for turning up, whether you're interested in it, you're dipping your toe into mentoring, you want to find out particular tools and techniques, you want an alternative perspective, you want a forum to discuss. It could be a variety of things, and I won't know that right now, but I encourage you to think about that, because that might steer some of the questions, or it might make you focus on certain slides more and to take that information and to process it. So I will leave that down to you, but I will encourage you, like I say to our students at the university, when you walk out of this room, how you think, speak and act differently as a consequence, because that demonstrates that learning's taken place. I'm not doing this to kill time. I'm not doing this because I have a couple of hours burning a hole in my pocket. I do this for professional development, for my development, for your development, to contribute to the good work that Bushra is doing across this region here. So this is a very, I may put in a few jokes and a few common images, this is a very serious thing. You know, mentoring is an amazing tool by which we can learn and grow. And I really hope that we'll use that. And if you are going to take something away from today, that you will do something with that. It won't just sit on a post-it note and get filed away somewhere, or sit on a file on your computer. So I encourage you, if there's something you take away from today based on what it is that you want, think about how it translates into action. So let's have a look. Who is this for? Anyone who's interested in mentoring, like we say, anyone who's perhaps currently mentoring people wanting to improve their practice. Just like Bushra said earlier on, we mentor all the time. That's my theory anyway. You know, if I walk into the office in the morning and someone's had a nightmare journey coming into work and they say, oh, I've had a terrible journey, and they start to explain, I'll say, well, I used to have those journeys, but now I leave 15 minutes earlier, or I take traffic-free routes, or I check the weather first, or maybe stagger my meetings so I don't have to, I'll delay my meeting so I've got that wiggle room that I can get in and not worry about being late. That's mentoring. I'm telling them what I've done to affect change in my life, in the hope that they'll take that information, apply it to themselves, and they'll have a more positive experience as a result. Just in a simple interface where someone's venting and I'm just passing on stuff. And folks, we do that all the time, yeah? It's kind of like storytelling. And what we want to do is just turn that storytelling, we want to turn it into an art. We want to turn it into a refined skill, something we can use tactically, on demand, when required, in order to get the best out of other people whilst developing ourselves. So perhaps you're already mentoring and you want to refine that. Maybe a lot of this is brand new. Don't worry, I'll cover some basic 101 stuff about mentoring, plus one of my own theories a little bit later on. Perhaps you want to look critically at your own role as a mentor. You'll each have a motivation for being there. I wonder which one, two, maybe all three. Maybe it's something different. Why are you here, and what do you want to take out of today? And at the end, we'll probably get a bit of feedback as to what you came for and actually what you leave with. So on that basis, he's at it again. Takeaway. What will you take away from today's session? Well, for me, you'll take away two main things. You might take away some, in a minutiae, a whole range of things, but two core things I want to take away. Firstly, improved understanding of what mentoring is. So you'll have an understanding at the moment, what it is, what you think it is. I just want to dial that up to 11. I want to increase that understanding. And that will be basically sharing my knowledge and awareness from my own explorations, personally as a mentor to other people, because I've got a perspective on it, of course. I live, eat, sleep, breathe mentoring. But secondly, hopefully some good practice, tools and structure. So by me being able to break down and analyse the different steps to some of the questions that I'm going to be posing a little bit later in terms of how do you deliver good mentoring, then you'll be able to experience it and understand it from my point of view, sharing my wisdom, and wisdom's critical to mentoring. And that's from delivering a mentoring scheme where, yes, I'm a mentor, but I also work with mentors who work with mentees, so I can see it from a step removed, and I will have quality conversations with mentors about what it is that they do and how. So an improved understanding, like some very practical stuff that you can take away in terms of tools, structure, and so on. Okay, that's what I hope you'll take away from today. But again, you're going to tell me later on whether or not I hit my mark. Sound. So what is good mentoring? So what does it conjure up in your mind when you think about an image of good mentoring? Well, first and foremost, we need to define that. We need to think about what that term actually means. Now, in Greek mythology, there was a famous Greek god leader who was going off to fight in another war. And that Greek leader put in charge 2 people to look after his own son in order to govern the kingdom in his absence. And one of those people was called mentor. This is what I've not written into it myself, but it's the Odyssey, it's Ulysses, it's a whole range of characters there. But the derivative of the term mentor comes from an individual who was there to give guidance and understanding to someone who was far more inexperienced. So we're talking way back in the echoes of mythology there as the origination of the word. But to bring it up to date, good mentoring, I'll give you a couple of definitions, one from an official source and then one from my interpretation. So there was an organisation that existed up until a few years ago, great organisation called the Mentoring and Befriending Foundation. They actually quality accredited my work for a number of years. Sadly, that organisation is no longer in circulation now. It was swallowed up by the NCVO, who ran some of its functions for a while. But a voluntary, mutually beneficial and purposeful relationship in which an individual gives time and support to another in order to help them make changes in their life. Now, that last bit for me is critical. There's a number of keywords here: voluntary, mutually beneficial, purposeful relationship, and an individual gives support to another to enable them. So that's about giving them the opportunity to empower them, to give them what they need to make changes in their life. Now, I've seen some great mentoring conversations over the years. I've been part of great mentoring conversations, but my frustration is that when you impart stuff that can be very personal, part of your own journey, you think, oh, there's some great stuff here. If you can learn from my mistakes, then perhaps it's going to save you a headache later on. And then when you speak to the individual sometime afterwards, you find out they really haven't done anything with what you've shared. And this is the thing, it's about making those changes, because the change illustrates that learning is taking place. And mentoring and learning go hand in hand. So that's the definition from the Mentoring and Befriending Foundation, but I could read it out, but you can read twice as fast as I can say it now. But quality time with the people, using experiences, sharing them, wisdom, make changes. I like the word wisdom. There's a fantastic phrase. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a piece of fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So whilst the tomato has seeds, it is technically a fruit. People have only tried, put it into a fruit salad. No, that doesn't go. That's not a very nice taste at all. It's not a sweet taste. There's a tang to it. It doesn't work as well. So knowledge and wisdom, it's worth understanding the two. So mentors can impart knowledge, but right at the heart of it, it's about wisdom, and wisdom is refined through life's experiences. The core image that I've got at the bottom that I use continually on the scheme is of a relay baton. So if you're familiar with athletics, you'll know that there'll be a runner, they'll be running a race, they'll carry a baton in their hand. They can't drop it, it means something, it represents something. However, at some point, they pass that baton over to someone else in the hope that they will grasp that baton and then take it on and do good things in the course of that race. Now, this is the thing about mentoring, because if there's really good stuff that's passed on, well, surely it should be passed on again and again and again, and it should go on cyclical. So what does that baton represent? It represents stories, knowledge, wisdom, anecdotes, things that are in a person's mind, born of their life experience. They could keep to themselves, but they choose to pass on. They want to hand that on to someone else because they know it will be of benefit. So as a mentor, perhaps ask yourself now, so if we start to define what mentoring is, what is it that you as an individual have that you can pass on to someone else? What stories would you share from your life? What key points would you want other people to understand? What would you want them to avoid? What would you want them to do to give them a tactical advantage, to give them an inside edge, to make sure that they avoid certain experiences? It's worth thinking what that baton represents, because you pass on stuff on a day-to-day basis, don't you? It's part of what we do. But to turn it into a tactical skill, recognizing what you've got that is of value and passing it on to the right person in the right way at the right time. Now, that's what makes a successful transition and allows another person to go forward in their race. But there's something about entrusting it. Because if you entrust that stuff to someone else, there's no guarantee that they will do something with it. We hope they'll do something with it, but there is no guarantee. So on that basis, we need to think to ourselves, okay, I'm giving this willingly, and I need to manage my expectations about that. We'll come on to expectations a bit later on. So hopefully that goes some way to defining a bit about what mentoring is, using an analogy, using an official definition, using my terms, and perhaps some of the bits that I said before this slide. Hopefully we're in a position to move on now, and let's start to build on this. So mentoring needs to understand its context. So mentoring happens in a whole variety of areas of life. Sometimes mentoring and coaching can cross over. Mentoring and befriending can cross over. So that's going from the social to the workplace, performance-based. It can go into sports. It can go into a whole variety of environments. But in this particular context, the way that I've framed it, the way that my work frames it on a day-to-day basis at DMU, is thinking about this notion of employability and trying to improve people's performance. Now, improving performance, again, it's a bit more of a coaching term that people like David Clutterbuck, world-renowned thinker on mentoring, argues that mentoring and coaching are almost indistinguishable. They used to be quite separate. They kind of overlap so heavily now that, someone who will mentor will then flip into coaching mode quite quickly, back into mentoring mode, and be able to hopefully use those skills tactically. So yes, we want to improve people's performance, and mentoring has a role there. But this notion of employability, and I'll come on to my theory in a second. I live, eat, sleep, breathe employability as well as mentoring, including the title, I'm Employability Mentoring Manager. And my focus at DMU is to improve the employability of everyone, our students, that comes through. So when they go into industry, they're ready for industry, they're ready for the challenges, they are fit for industry. But employability doesn't just matter to someone who's leaving university and then goes into the world of work. It matters to someone who wants to get their first promotion, who wants to get a higher promotion, who wants to leave their current role after 5 years and go on to the next. It matters to someone 30 years in their career as it does someone who's just starting out. Yeah? It's the ability to identify a job, get that job, land that job, be successful in that job, move onwards, move upwards, get poached, move elsewhere, be recognised for the work that you do. It is an ongoing, conscious investment. So for each of you folk here today, who will all be at different points, some of you may be self-employed, some of you are about to start to be employed somewhere, some of you perhaps in transition in between roles, maybe haven't made it onto the career ladder yet. You'll all have a viewpoint of the workplace, and hopefully you'll have a viewpoint on your own employability. And if you all want to mentor someone regarding their employability, one of the things I want to talk about now in my theory is the interrelationship between employability and mentoring, and the difference between outcomes and outputs. On the next slide, I've got a cyclical diagram I'm going to work through page by page, but hopefully this will be easier to understand. So here we go. So what you can see here, hopefully you're all still with me, a couple of green circles on screen. There's an inner circle and there's an outer circle. And what we're going to do, we're going to tackle the inner circle first, and then we're going to go into the outer circle, and we're going to tackle it in a clockwise direction. Because I believe when it comes to employability mentoring, there's things that we do and there's things that we want to change. So the things that we do are the outputs, and the things that we want to change are the outcomes. Yes, there's no point doing stuff if it doesn't result in effective change. So let's start to explore, and there's 4 key things here that I want to attack, that what we do as mentors. So first and foremost, we educate people. Yeah, we help people understand and learn stuff they don't already understand because they don't already have that experience. They haven't been where we've been, haven't seen what we've seen, haven't experienced what it's like to be made redundant or promoted or whatever it looks like in the world of work. So there's something about education. We teach things. That's our style. We have knowledge, we have information, we store it in here, and we want to impart that into an individual so that they learn from us. We educate them. So that's the first one. Education. Application. This is about how then those people take what we've given them and apply it in their lives. I'd like to believe as a good mentor, I won't just sit and have a conversation with someone and say, this is what I've done and how, and these are the techniques and stuff, and all the best. I've got a genuine interest in this person. I want to find out more about what it is that they do with what it is that I've given them, what I've entrusted to them, a bit like the relay baton, and how they're actually going to apply it in their life. Because if it went in one ear and out the other, folks, what's the point? But if they then try and apply that in their lives, I want to be there alongside them. I want to talk to them about it. How's it feeling? Having a go at this for the first time, trying out that new technique, you're putting in more applications. Fantastic. You're applying yourself. So first we teach, we educate, the education aspect, and then there's the application, applying what we've learned in our mind. Hopefully that's clear. The next bit, realization. I've genuinely lost count over the years of the amount of people who have learned stuff and applied themselves really well, and they just don't see how great they are. Yeah, they don't see how great they are. They don't realize it, and I point out things and say, oh, this is what I'm picking up from you. Can you see this? I'm like, no, I didn't see that. And it's like, how do you not realize these things? So as a mentor, part of my role is to help people realize and say, this is what I'm seeing in you. This is what you're saying. This is how you're behaving. This is the evidence you're providing with me. And almost like holding up a mirror. Do you see what I see? That level of realization. So we teach, we educate, education, application, realization. I want to be there as a mentor in all of these things. Not just, here's the information, off you go. I want to help them apply it. I want to help them wrestle with it as they see and start to realize the connection between what they're learning and the value that it's actually creating for themselves. And there's a consequence of that realization, appreciation, yeah? Getting them to kind of join the dots in their head. Okay, so I've learned about this, I've applied it, I've started to see the benefit. I see how that works now, I see how that fits together. Because I've not had that experience in the world of work. I haven't been there, but now you're explaining it to me, I'm having a go in my own particular way, and you're walking with me as we're exploring this. I can appreciate it, yeah? So these are the outputs. This is what we do. We educate, we help people apply, we help them realize, and then we help them appreciate it. That's what we do. These are the outputs, and that's the mentoring element. So I want to keep those on screen, and I want to add to the outer layers, because the outer layers complement the inner ones in each of those segments. So, you know, if you're teaching something to people, and if I'm passing that on, largely I'm imparting knowledge. Yeah. So if I'm educating people, they're acquiring knowledge in their minds. It's what they learn. They know things they didn't know before based on the experience that I've imparted. Knowledge. Application, if you apply, you have a go at something for the first time, you try it out, you practice, you get good at that thing, you deliberately use it in order to create success. Within that, right at the heart of that is skills. So I, as a mentor, want to make sure that not only I'm teaching people stuff, I can actually start to see their skill levels growing. Yeah, they're starting to get good at stuff that perhaps they hadn't tried out before, and I can see them in the process, and I can help them apply that. The natural changes, they start to become skilled at stuff. It's not just, mentoring is not just about knowing information, it's what you do with that. Like I said at the beginning, when they walk out of the session, how they think, speak, and act differently. So these are the natural outcomes. Education equals knowledge. Application equals skill. Realization, that's about developing an awareness, suddenly becoming aware of what's going on around you. Oh, I can start to see how that works together with that now. I wasn't aware of that before. Massive for our students that I work with at DMU. And I believe it doesn't just end when someone ends being a student and suddenly gets a job with an industry in that. For some people, the transition and the realization of actually seeing how the world works, politically, how workplaces work, understanding how other people work or perhaps don't work in the workplace, that growing awareness. As a mentor, I want to be alongside them as they wrestle with those difficult characters and concepts. They're trying things out and it all feels a bit alien. If I can start to help them to join the dots, yeah, they're going to grow, they're going to learn, they're going to develop as an individual. As a consequence, that natural output from the following section is attitude. Yeah? As I'm sure you'll know, when you meet people in life who appreciate what they've got, that gives you a strong sense that they've got a good attitude. If people don't appreciate what they've got, that's a bad attitude. Attitude and gratitude go hand in hand, don't they? So this inner circle, what we've got here, is all about, is about, sorry, I'll go to the next one there. So inner circle is the mentoring aspect. That's the output. That's what we actually do. Education, application, realization, appreciation. And the outer circle, well, that's the change that occurs. Knowledge, skill, awareness, and attitude. That's one of the things that I actually assess when I work at DMU with the students. I look at those 4 areas specifically. There are many other areas to employability around values and interests and experience, but obviously if they don't have experience and that's what they're going to the mentor to learn about, then we're not going to judge them on that. But these 4 areas, I believe, for our graduates going out into industry, knowledge, skill, awareness, and attitude, they are critical. So we use mentoring as a tool, we do the mentoring, and the natural outcome, the change that occurs, is improved knowledge, improved skill, improved awareness, improved attitude. So for me, this is the interrelationship between the two. These are my musings. Again, it's not in some great book somewhere, this is what exists in my mind, but hopefully gives you a bit of an insight into mentoring and mentoring in the workplace. So from the employability point of view, it's located in industry, and mentoring is the tool by which we develop people professionally. The only final thing to say is you'll see the circular yellow arrow in the center. Basically, what that's about saying is then the mentee then becomes the mentor. Because if a person is undergoing a process of learning, applying, realizing the value, then appreciating it, well, they're ready to hand the baton on to someone else and then undertake that cycle with someone and with someone else. So when I talk about the baton and the cyclical nature of it, this is what it's embedded in around my theory here. Hopefully that makes sense. Wonderful. I'll take it from your stunned silence that we should continue. So let's have a look at this. Mentoring has a value. It has a value to all the people involved in the relationship. As a person who runs a mentoring scheme at DMU, I see great value in the relationships. I see people learning, I see people growing, I see it from both mentors and mentee sides. You know, it's mutually beneficial. There's 6 core values that we have that basically underpin the project. And I'm going to list them now for you because I believe these things matter in terms of mentoring. Sorry, that's on the next slide. I'm running away with myself. This should have been better rehearsed. Never mind. I'm just being honest with you. So the value of mentoring if undertaken well. So if you undertake mentoring well, these are the things that you can get out of it. I could actually write lists and lists of this stuff. I actually wrote a document a while ago which had the personal benefits, it had the professional benefits, and also the industry benefits as well to employers who maybe have a member of staff who's mentoring within an organisation and they benefit from that person mentoring someone else. It adds value to them as an employee, gives them insight. What we've got on here, a range of different things that what you get out of mentoring, obvious things about empathy, being able to understand and kind of wrestle and empathise with someone who's in a different situation to yours, shared perspective. This notion of cultivation, I think, is huge. I'm always talking about this with people. It's kind of like what I said to you earlier on about having my introduction, talking about myself. And in my mind, before I started my role at DMU, I didn't really think about my past experiences. So a lot of that great stuff was lying dormant, hidden in my mind. There always little dark corners in my mind that I wasn't regularly accessing. And what I liken it to is like a farmer cultivating a field. So if you've ever seen a field being ploughed, a plough will go down through the soil and it will turn the soil, it will bring what is hidden up to the surface in a very particular way. So it unearths and brings it up and it exposes it. And that's what we need to do with our minds. It's about developing the tools to start cultivating that. It's about the ability to reflect. It's about being a reflective practitioner early on. And it's understanding that how do we look back? How do we identify where we've learned, opportunities for growth, what was going on there, how and why, and how do we apply it to our futures? We can do it for ourselves, we can do it for mentees, the people that we're looking after as well. So this cultivation, that's the one that always stands out on there. From, when I wrote these things, this is the one that I always come back to. But obviously, the other benefits there, improved relationships with people at work, respect, trust, any workplace is going to benefit from those sorts of things. If we undertake mentoring well, these are the natural fruits that come as a consequence. But folks, there's many, many more as well. I'm sure you know. These are the 6 values of mentoring. Sorry, I got my slides mixed up. Never mind, be quiet, Andy, continue. So these things, these 6 things, I believe are critical, absolutely critical in making sure that your mentoring works effectively with someone else. Now, some people might argue these things, but over the years have been refining and evolving the scheme that I run. And these things, they're kind of 101, always comes back to these things. If these things are in place, then it just makes mentoring more effective. So the first one being mentee-led. And I'm always saying this to the people in the project. I'm saying to the mentors, do not drive the relationship. Do not push the mentee. Do not say, I want to meet with you. If the mentee genuinely wants the help and wants to learn, they will approach you. And if they don't, then mentoring isn't right for them. It's all about their drive and their motivation to make it work. Next, it's voluntary. There should be no coercion involved. No one should be forced to be involved in mentoring. If you're in a workplace and someone said, you need a mentor, you're going to get mentored. For me, that takes away the spirit of it. It should be a choice. It should be the mentor choosing to be involved. It should be the mentee choosing to be involved. And you both come from those standpoints, free of obligation, of your own volition. Mutual learning. You maybe heard of the term reverse mentoring. There's a lot that you can learn from your mentee if you're a mentor. So I know from some of the students that I've mentored in the past, whilst I have a significant amount of industry experience, actually it benefits me to understand what it's like to walk in their shoes. Depending on the background they're from, the issues they've experienced in life, my job is in my workplace to work with students. So when I'm mentoring people, I'm listening a lot. I'm listening to what they're saying because the stories that they share with me, the perspective they share, informs my viewpoint, informs my work, and makes me better at what I do. So if you think a mentoring relationship is just a person with experience sharing with someone else and it's a one-way transition of information, that's wrong. It should be two-way. You should learn and you should learn from each other and you should be enriched by that in your own way. Trust, any good relationship, trust is a bedrock of that. Non-directive, mentors do not tell people what to do. Don't encourage that one bit. They just say, this is what I've experienced, how it worked for me, how it didn't work, why I did it, what I've learned from it, how I use those skills in the future, what I take from it now. Even in the process of mentoring, mentors can go through moments of realization and revelation about what they do. But just because it works for them doesn't mean it would work for the mentee. It's not about being right or wrong, non-directive, yeah? We don't tell the mentees what to do. They can take what we say, like I say, and they can throw it in the bin on the way out. We hope they won't, but that obviously could happen. And then finally, developmental. Okay, so we talk about professional development all the time. It's really important that mentors and mentees understand the nature of what is professional. For me, it's about someone who meets standards in education with their knowledge, someone who gets qualified, but a whole range of things, the level of practice that you have. So it's important to understand if you're developing into a professional in your workplace, what does that notion, what does that being a professional mean? And I mean different things in different workplaces. So these things matter in mentoring, being mentee-led, being voluntary, mutual learning, trust, non-directive and developmental. Of course, there's going to be other values as well, other things that are important to mentoring. But for me, it always comes back to the 6. It underpins everything that we do. Next slide. Good mentoring is being skills aware, being aware that you as mentors need to have good skills, or at least willing to develop those skills, because frankly, no one's perfect. So on that basis, are you aware of the skills that you need to have in order to make relationships work? On the next slide is my take on what good skills a mentor needs to have. And also, as you look through the process that I've highlighted, gives you an idea of what a mentoring session could potentially look like if you're new to it. For a memory device, all the keywords, they begin with A. So if you're mentoring someone, firstly, turn up, punctual, ready to arrive. Someone said to me recently, they said, if you arrive on time, you're already 15 minutes late. So there's something about being ready, being in the mindset, being engaged. So when you start that conversation, you're in the zone. Able to assess areas for growth within the mentee's abilities. Now, this is partly their responsibility as well. It is on the mentee to try and understand, if they come to a mentoring experience, what is it they want to know about? What experience they lack when they leave that mentoring environment? What do they want to leave with? Now, they may have an understanding of that, but it's your ability as a mentor to be able to assess that. Time and again, in mentoring sessions, David Cutterbuck also talks about this, the great mentoring speaker. I'm sure you can find him online if you look for him. He talks about sometimes in a mentoring conversation, so I might arrive ready to meet with a mentee and the mentee wants to talk about X. But actually through the conversation, as I assess that individual, what we actually need to talk about is Y. We need to talk about something else, but we needed to go through that in order to get to that. Or it might be in the conversation with the mentee that something is so strikingly obvious that the mentee just doesn't see about themselves, lacks that awareness that I talked about earlier on, that perhaps needs addressing. So it's your ability as a mentor to assess areas for growth in their abilities. So it could be their interpersonal skills. It could be that they're late every time to the mentoring meeting. It could be their level of organisation or disorganisation. They're not making notes, or they're failing to act on stuff in between meetings. Yeah? So being able to assess areas for growth in their abilities. They may come saying, I want this, this, and this. But as you mentor them, you might think, oh, there's some areas for growth, there's some things that we can tackle, some value that we can add. Knowing how to ask clarification questions and answer their questions. One of my biggest headaches on the scheme that I run is when students who I do an awful amount of preparation to get them ready to meet with their mentor, and I say, oh, have good questions ready, and then they'll have one meeting, and then I'll contact them and they'll say, I ran out of questions. And I'm thinking, what do you mean you ran out of questions? You've got a person here who's lived for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever they've lived, and they have a range of experiences that are high quality to share with you, and you simply ran out of questions. And I struggle with that because I do a lot of preparation around that, and I'll tell you about one of my techniques later on. So it's important that when the mentee asks a question, your ability to ask clarification, oh, why are you asking that? What's behind that? Is it you're hoping to get this? And just trying to dig a little bit deeper, because they may think they're asking the right questions, but you in your wisdom and knowledge might think, hold on, we can go a bit deeper here. So I need to clarify some stuff before we do. Obviously, as a good mentor, you need to know how to answer their questions, and I'll be covering some techniques on that later on. Applying tools and techniques, again, you'll have picked up stuff along the way, stuff that works for you. How do you articulate that and share that with them? It could help them too. Apply those tools. So when they leave the session, how do you keep in contact? Are you doing what we said that we'd do? It'd be really useful if you actually try out a tool and technique. It might open doors for you. Help them to act on what they've seen and heard, and then prioritise the actions you agree. So between you, hopefully between mentoring sessions, you'll both do something. You'll go away, do your individual tasks, and you'll come back and you'll check in. Again, it's not just about the conversation that you have, it's about the wider stuff that happens and the change following the meeting. So these are skills, all these things. Now, to ask clarification questions, answer questions, apply tools, undertake actions, these are things that you need to be good at as a mentor, or at least willing to get good at if you think you struggle with those things. But if you can harness those things, if you can get good at these things, it's definitely going to help your mentoring. Next slide. What does bad mentoring look like? Okay, so if we're going to think about good mentoring, it's important to understand what the bad stuff looks like. In previous training sessions, we've done some role play at DMU where I've basically been allowed to run riot and behave like a bad mentor to a mentee, and then people can hold up red and yellow cards and tell me what it is that I'm doing slightly wrong or actually very wrong. But for the purposes of this, we can't do that because of the nature of this training session. So instead, I've chosen to list a number of behaviours to avoid when engaging in mentoring. Some of them might seem like common sense. The only problem with common sense is sometimes with people, it's not that common. But other things here, you might think, oh, I haven't really thought of that before, but some general stuff here, mentoring, if you're talking about your experiences, about talking about them in a relatively objective way, trying to start bragging about your achievements, you never know about the insecurities of the person that you're talking to. Again, you're not there to tell them what to do, you're not their boss, you're not their parent. Don't be distracted by phone or other devices. I've seen this a lot with students, sadly, but it also can happen with mentors as well. People who lead busy lives who are managing multiple contracts or different commitments. It's really important that when you're in that moment, you are in that moment with them, because they want to feel that they have your full attention. Physical touching of any kind, it's rare for it to happen, but it has happened on a couple of occasions on the scheme that I've been involved in. So I have had to have a word with people, even if it's just a hand on the shoulder. You don't need to touch their shoulder. So, just don't do that. And things like cutting across people. I've got to own up to this one. I'm terrible at it, as my family will testify, in that someone's having a conversation with me and I think of something and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to share this point. I can't wait to share this point. And I'm starting to lean forward. And all the time that I'm doing that, I'm refining the point that I'm making, and I've missed half of what they're sharing with me. It could have been of real value, but I just wasn't in that moment. And that's something I know I need to work on as an individual. What's so important that I have to say that I have to shut that person up? I need to be there for them first and foremost. I'll get my chance, write it down, but not to cut across them in that way. It's a whole range of things that we encourage mentors not to do, behaviours to avoid, because then it just keeps things on a professional level. What does good mentoring look like? Kind of encapsulates some of the things that I've said earlier on. There's a list of words there. But I quite like this image. I use this image a lot. It's an image of popcorn. Hopefully we all like popcorn. If you get some popcorn from a supermarket and you bring it home in one of those bags, what you do is you'll put that popcorn, you put it in the microwave, won't you? And you'll switch the microwave on. And what will happen is it will start to transform, because the microwave, through its microwaves and its wonderful science ways, which I simply don't know about, will infuse heat. And then as a consequence, the popcorn will start to transform. And as it transforms, it goes from one state into another state. And for me, what the popcorn represents here, on the left-hand side where you see the seed, the basic fundamental state, which has all those core ingredients, for me, that's potential. That's potential with an individual. All the things are there, but energy has not been fully invested. On the right-hand side of that scale, where you can start to see the piece of corn transform, I'm talking about full-blown talent. And what we know is industry is looking for talent. Yes, it's looking for potential in people that it can nurture and mould in its own particular way when a person gets that role. But we want talented individuals to join our organisations and help develop our success, don't we? So it's really important as mentors, we invest energy in those mentees. But it is critical that mentees invest that energy in themselves. Because if they're not willing to invest energy, then you're trying to force something that doesn't want to be forced. So it's about that investment of energy, but it's also these key things here. Knowing how to listen, how to genuinely listen, to be in the room, to be present, nodding, gesturing, reframing, smiling, giving them time to speak. Active listening matters in mentoring. Being able to ask good questions, covered that earlier on. We'll go on to my theory a little bit later on. Being able to empathise, being able to understand the emotions that a person's experiencing and going through, and demonstrate to them that you understand those emotions, developing that understanding, sharing with them, being in the moment, exchanging of goodies. I've got some stuff to exchange with you, you exchange your stuff with me, and as a result, we're richer as a consequence of it. And that notion of educating, it's all information, it's all wisdom, it's all knowledge, and we can use it in the future. So think about popcorn. Yeah? If we're going to transform the people that we work with in our organisations from that potential to talent, then it must require the investment of energy, and perhaps more energy than people actually realise. It's not just about that conversation. It's about all the stuff that comes as a result and action. Penultimate slide now before we go into our tea break, which will probably be about 5 minutes or so, where you'll have an opportunity to grill me and ask me some questions, or perhaps each other. I know there's some very talented mentors on tap on the list of people that we've got here today. In setting up the scheme and running the scheme that I've run for 6.5 years at DMU now, I'm very well aware of the challenges of what it takes to make a high quality mentoring scheme. It's something I'm very, very proud of. But there have been lots of things that have thrown me along the way. Top of the tree, above any of these things here, is around expectations. Expectations all day long, managing expectations between people. Say to students, if you're going to initiate a discussion with a mentor, if you're going to initiate a relationship with a mentor, make sure that your expectations of each other are managed, about how often you meet, about the level of punctuality, about what the mentor can and cannot provide you. They'll talk to you, but they're not allowed to offer you a job. So it's about leveling the students' expectations. It's about leveling their expectations of me as someone who oversees that scheme. But also the mentor might come and think, okay, well, I expect this student, I've done it all, I'm amazing, I expect them to do exactly as I've done. Well, no, they don't have to do what you've done at all. They're there to listen to you and to respect what you've done, but they may choose to go and do the absolute opposite, because that's how they're relating it to them. And that might leave a few mentors a bit annoyed that they didn't feel that they were being followed up on, but they were listened to. It's just they're going to take a different route. It's really important to understand expectations and make sure that they're matched. And that is such a fine balancing act in mentoring. Changes to circumstances, whether it be, I don't know, for some of our students, they've got an exam coming up, maybe some people in the workplace, working commitments might send them overseas, or that could do some professional development, a role might change, a whole number of things that can happen. If they are not communicated to the other party is left guessing about what's going on. And again, over the years, I've seen relationships where people become frustrated with each other because one didn't tell the other what was going on. It's like any relationship in life. If you fail to invest in it, if you fail to communicate, watch that relationship fall apart before your very eyes. This notion of commitment, yes, it can change over a period of time, but that needs to be communicated. But if that commitment wanes, if it kind of dies off, and then people become less responsive and less interested in that, that can affect a relationship. So it's really important that you understand and can read the person when that motivation is perhaps starting to wane, and checking in and saying, is this still working for you? You know, should mentoring be coming to an end? Do we need to inject a new insight into this? So commitment matters. Also informality. So for some relationships, if they become too informal, that suggests the relationships may be taking a different turn, perhaps leaving mentoring and becoming something else, something perhaps almost inappropriate that it shouldn't be becoming. So it's about looking for that informality that exists and saying, hold on, we entered into this relationship on a professional basis, we agreed our expectations, and let's try and manage those expectations. And whilst, yes, a level of informality and humour might creep in, but not to let it go too far astray. And that's about trusting your judgment and looking back to your original agreements. It's always a challenge when mentoring comes to an end. Now, there will always be people that say, well, technically it doesn't end because you're always going to be around for me as a mentor for a long time in life. But for some people, it works well if that mentoring does come to an end, and then people can say, okay, we can draw a line on that. We achieve what we said that we set out to achieve. We've stuck to the agreements, and now you're part of my professional network for the future. Absolutely fine. And it might be, you might go back and do a little bit more mentoring here and there in the future. But again, you will choose to overtly say, let's do some mentoring, let's get back into it. It's just understanding if it's left to drift, a bit like the waning thing, then what happens when it ends? Does it end? Does a person lost interest? Have they dropped off the edge of the earth? Well, that's not ideal, is it? In a relationship which is built on developing trust and understanding of each other. You owe it to each other to respect each other in that way. And then finally, valuing each other. And I've said the mentor especially, it's not that the mentor doesn't value the mentee, it's just in my experience. And I've seen some fantastic students over the years really valuing their mentor, but I've seen way too many students not valuing their mentor, not valuing the person who's giving up a significant amount of their time and sharing their life, their experience, their hard work, their journey with someone, and that doesn't seem to be respected. It doesn't seem to be valued by the individual, in that they just switch off, don't bother turning up. And that can be deeply upsetting. I've had some great people leave my scheme as a consequence of that, and I don't want to see that happen, because I want to make sure that everyone has a quality experience. So mentoring can be challenging if we don't manage expectations, if we're not aware of changes to circumstances and they're communicated, if commitment changes, if informality creeps in, if endings aren't clear and managed effectively, if we don't value each other. These are the things, these are the problems that occur in mentoring. And we need to be aware of those challenges and we need to take good mentoring. So the next slide should be a teacup, which is your signal to run for the hills. I really do hope you come back after this, so I'll encourage you to put your microphones on. And then if any of you would like to ask me any questions, or indeed any other people would like to chip in with the questions, now here is your time to do that. And perhaps we'll say a good 5 minutes or so if people want to ask anything. How does that sound?
That's great. Yeah, that good.
Are we all here? Would anyone like to ask any questions at this point based on what we've covered so far? Anything might have written down or want to ask? A stunned silence.
Not necessarily a question, but I think it's a fine line, which I've learned, that micromanaging isn't mentoring. And it's so easy to say to people, oh, I'll do it myself, because you think you're going to get it done better if you do it yourself. But it's remembering that they're not necessarily going to learn anything also. So it's equipping them with those skills and the tools so that they learn to do it themselves. And I think that's quite important from what you said. And I think the other thing is remembering no two mentees will be the same. People learn differently. And it's being able to pick up on that and seeing what works for people and being willing to adapt in what we're doing to suit the needs of the mentee. So, no, thank you for that, Andy. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Just in response to that, I immediately think of hats and people wearing different hats. In that, I'm thinking of my old boss, Judy, who used to work in community education. So years ago, I started out as a youth worker, and she was my first ever line manager in a profession I wanted to be in anyway, because I've done some of the stuff beforehand. And she was fantastic. And she was very good at being able to switch hats quite quickly. So I knew when she had her boss's hat on, because it was very directive, it was about targets, it was about the tasks. But then she would also just seamlessly slip into like a mentoring mode. And one of the phrases that she always used to say to me, she said, never give anyone any reason to criticize your practice. And that's about a paper trail, that's about covering yourself, that's about doing quality work. And those words, I mean, that was, wow, when was that? Goodness, that was about the year 2000, something like that. And her words, there's a range of things that she said to me that still ring in my mind. That wasn't about her giving me something performance or objective oriented. It wasn't about a smart goal. That was about the advice and guidance. And she would give me illustrations and talk through what she'd done, where she'd been, where people had criticised her practice and where she'd learned to shore that up to become more effective in what she did. And I remember that feeling very difficult from my boss telling me what to do, from being directive to more that kind of mentoring style. And I think the trick is being aware of when you're doing that. Yeah. And a good manager in the industry will understand that they might put a coaching hat on, so they might work with some performance. So I'm not going to tell you the answer. I believe you've got the answer. I'm going to coach that answer out of you. And then I'll flip into a mentoring mode and saying, well, actually, I've got some experience here that you might not have. So I'm going to share that with you. And then they might go into perhaps a more autocratic mode saying, but I want this done by the end of the day, so go and get on and do it. Do you know what I mean? So it's being aware of the hats that you're using and applying them in the right context at the right time.
Yeah.
I think anyway. Agree with me, disagree with me, argue with me.
Agree.
You're all being far too nice. Is there anything that I've said in the presentation that was perhaps unclear? Perhaps either the model or the definition of mentoring? Is anyone currently mentoring at the moment, and any of that has been of use to them in terms of getting a level of clarity? Just double check that your speakers are off. On, sorry, if you are speaking. I'll assume you're fine with that. I'm wondering, have we lost anyone? Has anyone vacated their screen perhaps and then gone for a comfort break? I'm still there.
I'm still there.
I can actually see.
How many folk do we have online?
You've still got 8. Do you want to stop the screen share? Then you should be able to get the gallery view back to see who's on.
I can kind of get a gallery view in the corner, but it's not playing ball in the way that I would like it to. No worries. No worries. So Steve's still on. Aisha, are you still on?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, I can see everyone's still on. Some have got.
It's Asma. I'm still here as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Shall I assume that we're all happy to crack on then if no one wants a particular comfort break? No one's treating themselves to their favourite beverage? A stunned silence. Wow. I've beaten you in submission with my words. Well, let's carry on, shall we? Let's see where the conversation takes us. So in the first half of the presentation, we're saying what is good mentoring. Hopefully there's been some information there about trying to define it, understand the skills behind it, those things that will have perhaps been of value. Now, the second part of the session is more devoted to actually, well, how do we do that? If we know what it is, then what does it actually look like in practice? And again, some of this is my musings from stuff that I've done over the years. I'm going to see if I can reduce that just so I can, there you go, I can see my screen now. Wonderful. So I'm going to be talking about a variety of things now, role of mentor, role of mentee, and some of the tools and techniques that I've used that by explaining it and breaking it down in detail might be useful for each of you when it comes to developing your own style or how you will actually mentor. Okay, let's get to it, right then. Oh, allow me to change the screen. There you go. So how do you deliver good mentoring? Wonderful. Well, let's firstly think about the role. Haha, he's at it again. There you go. The role as a mentor. You have a specific role, and it's worth understanding your role, and it's worth understanding the mentee's role as well. Because when you understand each other's role, you know where you stand in relation to each other, and that's all about kind of managing those expectations. So I want you to have a think now. What might your role be as a mentor? I won't field any responses because that means getting back on the mics and stuff. But if you're going to be a mentor, what is your role? What are you there to do? What will you actually do? Almost like the tasks, the duties, the core responsibilities. What is your role as a mentor? Let's have some thoughts on the screen. This is what I share with the mentees. So when I prep my mentees at DMU, I share this information with them because I want them to understand that yes, they have a role, but it's important to know what to expect from the mentor that's been allocated to you. So as a mentee, you're the person that will set up the meeting, the call, the online Skype. The mentee sets those things up. So the role of a mentor is to simply respond to that. I always say to my mentors, I don't want you chasing mentees. If you're chasing them to meet up, does that say something about their level of motivation? If they want you as a mentor, if any of you folk are thinking about mentoring in the workplace, doing mentoring, I'd like to think that you would want the mentee to want your time, to be hungry to learn from you, to engage with you. If that hunger and desire isn't there, there's an issue. So you're there to respond to their requests. That's what I would argue. Obviously, punctuality, attend scheduled meetings, listen to the mentees. That's standard, isn't it? Ask the clarifying questions talked about earlier on. Challenge and encourage mentees. Again, this is from my practice that I will tread a line, and sometimes I'll go on one side of the line, and sometimes I'll go on the other side of the line. That line being between challenging and encouragement. Sometimes mentees need encouragement, perhaps their worldview, their view of themselves, perhaps a bit down on themselves, perhaps don't recognise the talents they've got, don't see that they actually bring stuff to the party. Perhaps sometimes they need challenging on their viewpoints, challenging on their self-view. Maybe there's something about their attitude and what they bring to mentoring that perhaps could do with some level of challenge. I've got some mentors on my scheme who are amazing challengers, who just, they'll give it to people straight between the eyes. And then there are other people who perhaps are a lot more of a softer encourager. We need to be able to play both sides with mentees in understanding actually what are their needs, do they need encouragement, do they need challenging, and which side of that do I play at any given point during the meeting. As mentors, you share your own experience from your perspective. That's the baton being passed on. That's you offering something to someone else where they haven't experienced what you've experienced in order to kind of illuminate their understanding and what the pathway ahead might be. Trust and rapport, centre of any good relationship. Discuss tools and techniques. What is it you've done and how? You will have all gained skills in your life so far. You've all gotten good at stuff. And there'll be a particular way or a range of ways that you will do things depending on the context. So what is it that you do and how? A bit like Dr. Mark at the beginning, I was talking about the academic he met who couldn't say what he did and how he did it. He just did it. You need to know how you've done these things. And tools and techniques are good ways of then teaching other people how to do something, framing things in a way that's easy to understand in their minds. Finally, undertaking any actions. As a mentor, you might agree to go away and do a bit of research for them, send them a useful PDF, link them up to a colleague of yours who could also be a good point of reference. So it's understanding what your role is. I would argue there could be many things on there as well, but these are the things that you need to do. Respond to them, be punctual, listen, ask the clarification questions, share experiences, build trust and rapport, and so on. So that's what I think the role of a mentor is. The role of a mentee. So if that's what the mentor is going to be doing, what is it the mentee's role to do? Because if you're going to engage in good mentoring, if you're going to deliver good mentoring, you need to understand where they are in relation to you. So here's my thoughts. They've got to identify the things related to their work they want to improve on, be it their employability, be it their aspirations, be it a particular level of knowledge relating to the sector that they work in. What is it that they want to improve? What is it they want to change about themselves? The mentee, they're the ones that arrange the phone calls. Like I say, they arrange it with you. They should be chasing you. If you've got stuff that they want, then they should be coming to you for that. They ask you questions about what they want to explore their career. Again, they'll have initial questions and hopefully they'll have supplementary questions. I call it a spirit of inquiry, yeah? So if you are genuinely interested in someone else, you're going to want to flood them with questions, not go, that's my 5 questions, I'm done. Well, actually, I've asked my first question. You mentioned 2 or 3 things. Can we go into those in a little bit more detail? What was going on in your mind when you were experiencing that? How did that feel? What have you learned from that as a consequence? How do you apply that practice in your day? Do you know what I mean? There's 1,000 questions that mentees can be asking mentors if they are genuinely interested in that individual. And what I try and do with our mentees and asking is to foster that, develop that spirit of inquiry. That's what we want for you. Mentees will listen to you. Hopefully, of course, they'll listen to you. Hopefully, they'll make notes on what you're doing. They'll be listening. They'll be maybe have a sound recorder, maybe writing things down shorthand or whatever. and they'll take that information away. They will then try and act on that, do stuff with that. That's when we know mentoring's taking place, because it's creating a change in the way that they think, the way that they speak, in the actions they undertake afterwards. But you're going to want to hear about that. So you're going to want to meet again and discuss that progress. How did that technique work out for you? Was it any good? Was it an absolute shocker? Would you not do that again? Do you feel more confident as a result of speaking out a little bit more in particular environments? It's those sorts of things you want to find out about, because that's good for you. Again, I'll talk a little bit later about how you can identify as a mentor whether or not mentoring is actually working. But I think you need that, because that's the bit, that's the payment you get. That's the feel-good feeling. I'm being listened to. My perspective is valued. Someone is actually using what I'm saying and passing it on, and maybe they'll pass it on again. You know, it's that warm, fuzzy feeling that so many people involved in my scheme talk about, because they want to help. Of course they want to help. And the mentee, they drive the relationship and they remain accountable. So, so important. They push the relationship forward, not the mentor. Can't emphasise that enough. That's the standpoint of my scheme at DMU. You may agree with that, may disagree with that. But if there's a mentor, you're the one that's pushing the relationship. Ask yourself what's going on with that individual. Why are they not hungry for more information from you? Have they had enough? They're tired? Not bothered in the first place? What was going on with them? That's worth assessing. So understanding the role of the mentee, that's about delivering good mentoring. Also do by undertaking quality preparation. So if I didn't think about any of my experiences in the past and just turned it to a mentoring meeting, and then a mentee said to me, oh, I'm really struggling with X, I've got no experience in it. Have you got experience in that? Tell me what you did, what was going on? And I sit there and I go, I'm really not quite sure. I'd have to think about that. And I could maybe spend 5 minutes in a stunned silence trying to piece together my mind whilst the person's looking at the watch and thinking, hold on, you're a mentor, you should know these things. Yeah? But rather like the guy at the beginning that I talked about, don't revisit the information, don't think about what you've been through and how you do things, then how can you articulate that? So what I've got is a range of information here about how it is that you can start to think about and prepare for those mentoring meetings. And it starts with reflection, yeah? Looking back, what was my experience? What was going on at the time? What happened? Why did it happen? What action did I put in place? How have I learned? How have I changed as a result? What wisdom have I now got as a consequence of that? Now you can either make notes on paper. I know certainly some of the older mentors on my scheme who have decades of experience often find it handy to write some of this stuff down just as a reference point. They even bring some of this written information to their meetings, just to jog their memory. I'm in my mid-40s now, so I know from my past experiences that I can sometimes forget entire jobs that I've done, you know, or a project that I've worked on. And one day I'll come to me and think, oh man, those people I work with, that was an awesome time. How could I possibly forget that? And this is the thing, because our minds can kind of heap stuff on top of it as our daily lives go on and all the pressures and things that we have to deal with. And these things get hidden. At this point, I'll come to the images that are at the bottom of the screen now. I'm keeping my voice down because my daughter's downstairs, and this point relates to her. But basically, what we've got an image on the left that's basically of a child's bedroom, which if any of you are parents and perhaps seen a bedroom of a 10 to 15-year-old or whatever, and that they tend to be quite messy. I may be stereotyping here, is that fair? I'm not quite sure. But a messy child's bedroom and a well-referenced library. Now, if I give you the analogy of my daughter, if I say to my daughter, right, we're going out tonight, we're going to go to a restaurant somewhere, and maybe she's got her favourite bracelet that grandma bought her. And that bracelet is somewhere in that room. It's somewhere in that room and it's hidden. So she'll go up and she'll try and find it, but she's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 50. Maybe she doesn't find it in the end. That thing that she needs, that is of value to her, is somewhere hidden amongst that stuff. But the chances are it's probably under a book, and that's covered over by a pillow, and then by a hoodie and by a blanket. And it's there, it's right there. She just can't find it because there's other stuff that is of value to her that's covering it over. Now, I think that's a lot like our minds. And for the young ones of you watching this, the bad news is from my experience in that it gets harder as you get older to retain some of these memories. We need to be revisiting these things regularly. Yeah? We need to be looking at our experiences. What have we been through? Where have we worked? What has life been like for us? And finding a way of noting that. And there's ways in which we can filter that. So I've listed things like, was it a particular time in your life that was critical? Were you in a specific place? In a country, in an office, in wherever you were? What was the situation? What was going on? Was there a particular issue arising? Were you in a role at that time? Were you experiencing success? We can start to filter some of our key life experiences and almost categorize them under each of these different terms, and there are other terms as well. And it just helps them then for ease of reference that when we come to our mentoring and someone asks us about this, we can think, I remember being your age, so these things were going on at that time. Or you've asked me about a particular situation, and I remember a range of situations like that. Or I was in a particular role, and you've asked about that role, and what did I do in that role? So it's a way of referencing and indexing our minds. Now, some of that you may have to do on paper because there'll be quite a lot of information, I'm sure, once you start to go digging. But unless you go digging, unless you go tidying the bedroom floor and start to pick things up and think, okay, my daughter's bracelet, that should really be on the shelf where she keeps some of her jewellery. Which means the next time I say we're going out, she goes into her room, goes to the shelf, bang, got it. Thing that she needed was there straight away on hand and she had it. So it's a way of taking our minds from being like a disorganised teenager's bedroom floor and turning it into a well-referenced library. So if you go into a library and you ask for a particular book, they can point you to the area, the section, the row, the shelf, the subsection, bang, it's where it should be. Now, to organise a library takes time from scratch, a lot of hard work and effort. So with your minds, which are far more deep and complex than any library, with all sorts of hidden corners, and you've retained so much information in your life so far that you simply may not be aware of now. So how do you start to go digging as an individual? How do you start to go into those places and start to reference and index and put stuff in the right place? So when it comes to your mentoring, you are prepared. You're prepared, you've got that information, you've organised it, and you can convey it with ease. So these are my thoughts, and you've probably read through the rest of that 2 times over since I've been speaking. Sorry, I go off on a tangent. I get quite passionate about these things, but I love what I do, so yeah. So here's some guidance here on how to take the preparation before you go into the mentoring meetings, because it is going to equip you with answers that are easier to access as a consequence, because you're keeping that stuff cultivated, you're keeping it at the surface, you're keeping it referenced. For me, there's no shortcut. That takes hard work. Okay, so if you're interested in mentoring and you want to make mentoring work, really important, you do your preparation. Doesn't mean you have to give perfect answers, doesn't mean you have to be right, doesn't have to be wrong. You just need to know your experiences and then articulate them effectively. There's an added benefit to that as well, by the way. So if any of you are not near the end of your career and at some point you intend to go and get a job interview, or you have to go and pitch for a contract, maybe you're self-employed, you're going to be in front of a range of people who are going to be asking you questions, aren't they? And they can ask you questions, and some of those questions will be about your past or your prior experience. And in that moment where you're faced with those individuals, you will then have to go into your mind, into those dark corners, find something that is of value, that connects to what they want, and then articulate it in a way that meets their needs. Mentoring, practicing mentoring on an ongoing basis, and these tools of reflection, keep that stuff right at the surface. So that when you next go for a job interview, when you want to go and showcase your talents and abilities, and they ask you about your experience, you got it. You can talk to them, you can inspire them, you can sing. This is what we want for you when you're developing as a professional. And if you're going to be mentoring other people in industry, in whatever industry you're going into, you want to be a mentor. If you can pass on this tool and technique, they'll remember you. They'll remember you for unlocking that ability in their mind to get the best out of your mind, to put yourself in prime position. Preparation matters. It doesn't just benefit mentoring, it benefits your ongoing career trajectory as well. Following a quality process. Right, so this is all about when you're actually in the moment, yeah? So imagine yourself right now, you're sitting in front of a mentee and that person in your workplace or wherever asks you a question. So how is it that you deal with that question? How is it that you respond to them? So I've got some guidance here on how to do that. All I did, a bit like the guy at the beginning I spoke about, he couldn't tell you what he did. This is exactly what I do. So when someone asks me a question, I filter this information in my mind. Yeah? So I've thought about these things in advance because I've prepared for the mentoring meeting. When they ask me something, I want to clarify and make sure that their inquiry, I understand what it is. The last thing I want to do is answer something completely different. I'll think about what they've said and I'll start to filter a few responses, a handful of different examples. So perhaps maybe they've asked me about, they say, classic one for students is I'm really scared of networking. I'm frightened of the idea of going to meet a range of people, going to an event, going to a conference, people I don't know, and speak to them. So what I'll do is I'll filter a range of networking experiences in my mind when I was down at Woburn Abbey, when I was at Aston Villa Football Club, when I was at DNU's venue, where there was a networking thing that just got naturally created because of people in the room. And I'll have a range of those, and then when given the opportunity to speak, I'll briefly share each of those, and I'll say, oh, pick one or two. Which one of these do you want me to talk about? And they might say, oh, that one sounds interesting, or tell me about all of them. But it's giving them an opportunity to tailor my response to what it is that they want to talk about. Then it's about going into the appropriate level of detail. And as you do that, just checking in so often and just saying, does this make sense? Am I on the right track? Is it value? Now, when we talk about values earlier on, if you've got a trusting and open relationship and expectation to manage, hopefully they should be candid enough to say to you, actually, no, sorry, that's not what I was asking about. Can we rephrase this? Can we start again? Or they'll say, yeah, no, this is really useful, thank you, but that honesty needs to be there. Otherwise, you could be doing this all day long and they're actually not engaging with you. So filtering those experiences, giving them a range of options, then sharing specific one or more options with them based on their needs. Then a bit like the STAR technique in any job interview, what was going on, what was the scene, what were you thinking? So it's explaining to them in a way that will paint a picture in their minds. They can go through what you went through, that illuminates the issues, the inquiry. They get a sense of what it was like, they get a sense of the emotions, and then as a consequence, they can kind of walk in your shoes. They can get a sense of what it's like for you. You can reverse mentor and you can get a sense of what it would be like if they put themselves in your position by saying what they would do, so you grow in your understanding of each other. Yeah? So it's about understanding these kind of key questions behind their particular selections. And as a consequence of that, what do they take from it? What are the future lessons and what are the actions? Not just talking for talking's sake. I'm not interested in random conversations. This is about professional development. Yeah? So this is the quality process that I follow in my mind. Sometimes it's not as neat as that. Sometimes it's a little bit messy because you're kind of going backwards and forwards. And sometimes they're not quite sure. And sometimes you have to draw out. But in terms of like a model in my mind, this is what it looks like when I'm mentoring. Boom. Right. So I think it's important for you to understand that your work has an impact on people. One of the disheartening things as a mentor is when you're mentoring someone and you can't necessarily see how they're benefiting you. Is this making a difference? They think I'm an idiot, I'm only good at this, I'm not worthy of being their mentor. All those sorts of things can kind of creep into your mind. So it's important to have a range of tools to ask yourself and them, is this working for you? Yeah? This is professional development, yeah? It's not just a casual chat. So using your own reflections, what does that tell you about how it went? What did you observe in the meeting? Did you see them making copious notes? Did you run out of time because they were asking so many questions? What does that tell you about how engaged they were? Can you draw on a multitude of experiences, or are you know, I've met people in the past that when I've seen them mentor, they're a one-trick pony and they keep on talking about the same things. And I think it's great that you have that experience, but you need to be able to draw on a wide range of stuff, otherwise you can see it's quite one-dimensional, and you need to be able to articulate that stuff in a way that they understand. When you share information, what's their initial reaction? Is it surprise? Is it intrigue? Is it disinterest? Did you miss the mark with what you shared with them and you need to share perhaps something different? They can bring you back for more, getting feedback from the sessions, so on and so forth. So there's a range of different things here that you can ask yourself and them to identify if what you're doing is making a difference. One of the things that I struggle with at DMU, at the university, is as a provider of a scheme that is designed to improve the students' employability, it sits alongside things like placements, business start advice, careers fairs, all these different offers. And we all hope and we all believe that what we do makes a difference to the students and will make them more employable. But can I say categorically that what I do definitively has ensured that someone bagged a job or set up their business effectively? I can't do it with 100% assurance. I can believe it contributed towards it. So there's an element of mentoring is not objective. There's an element of subjectivity to it, in that it is a contributing factor towards someone's professional development. And I believe for each of you, if you're interested in engaging in mentoring, it's important for you to be able to identify that what you do makes a difference, because that's the bit where you get your back scratched. That's the bit that you feel a sense of achievement from. Because it's great to give, and I love giving, it's a wonderful feeling. But I also know, maybe it's my ego or whatever than that, but I need to be fed as well. I need to get a sense that what I'm doing and saying makes a difference to someone else. So it's understanding that you can draw out that information from someone, but you can also do it by your own reflections. So again, if this is being recorded, obviously you can revisit these later on, but ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself these questions. Is what I'm doing adding value? Is it having an impact on the mentee? Because good mentoring should have an impact. Wonderful. Questions. Right, I mentioned this earlier on. Let's get stuck into questions briefly. So please don't assume that a mentee knows how to ask good questions. The vast majority of students that I've prepared for mentoring in my time don't know how to ask good questions, with all due respect to them. There are a handful of people that I've met who've been brilliant, who really do have that spirit of inquiry and can, almost like the layers of an onion, can kind of go to a deeper layer, and really start to dig into the detail. There's a particular skill to it, and in the past, and I'm thinking so, Samantha's one of the participants on here, and Samantha will recall the mentoring session that I had with the mentor Zainab to law students, and I think the majority of the session was me actually asking questions rather than the students asking questions, because those students had been to previous law sessions with the law mentors, but they were only taking it to a superficial level. So I started asking questions that perhaps they were maybe frightened to ask or didn't know to ask. And I was stopping you folk kind of mid-speech and said, well, no, tell me more about that. Or what does that mean? Do we know what that means? And the session just went to a really, I mean, you vibed really well, Samantha, with Zainab, which was brilliant. But it went to a much deeper level. And the students all said that was the best session they went to. And that's because I've developed the skill over a period of time of knowing how to ask good questions. We shouldn't assume that students have that skill. Or in your case, sorry, I'm talking to students. In your case, people that you might work with in industry. So it's worth checking in with them about their questioning technique. How are they coming up with the questions? Assessing the questions they ask you, are they quite weak questions? Are they closed questions? Could there be more work done there? Sometimes you'll have to ask questions yourself in order to get to the heart of inquiry. Again, they might say that one thing, but actually what we need to be talking about is this thing over here that we have to go through that. And as David Clutterbuck talks about, often initial questions can be a distraction and the heart of the inquiry is perhaps somewhere else. Now, there's a particular framework that I use for questions at DMU, and it's around 3 simple steps: clarity, motive, and outcome. And I recall a situation a couple of years ago. It was a group mentoring session, and there was probably 12 students in a circle. There was 3 mentors, and a young lad put a hand up and said, I've got a question for you. And he just went off on one. It was like a villain's monologue. It was endless. He went on for well over a minute. It started off with a half-baked question, and then it kind of went into some weird anecdote, and then that kind of went into something else, and then there was another half-baked question. And you could just see the mentor's face glazing over, and I just went forward. I said, I don't know what you're asking. I don't know what you're asking. The question isn't clear. Even though we did the question preparation session, he had ignored what was written down in front of him. I think he just got caught up in the moment and just, well, he just went off into the distance. So it's really important in order to maximise the time and to give you as a mentor a sense of they know what they're here to ask. They understand the framework of clarity, motive, and outcome. So clarity is being clear about what it is that you want to ask about. So I have a question for you about networking. So on that basis, you're thinking about your networking experience as a mentor. You're not thinking of other things associated with professional development or promotions or politics at work or culture. You're thinking about networking. That's the first part. I have a question about networking. Next part is motive. Why? Why is that? Well, I've never experienced networking, or people are always talking about it and it scares me stiff. Or I'm really excited by the idea of actually meeting new people from different things. It's the motive behind it will give you an idea as a mentor how to attack their question. It gives you a focus. So we're talking about mentoring, and the reason why is because of this thing here. This is your motive. And an outcome, this is where the mentee ideally is starting to share with you what it is they hope to get from your answer. Okay, so that could be, I hope to improve my confidence or my knowledge or my awareness or my understanding, or get a sense of whatever it might be. So I have a question about this. This is why I'm asking, and this is what I hope to get from your answer. And what that should do as a mentor, if they can learn to ask questions, if you can encourage them to ask questions that way, when they ask it, it should naturally allow you to start filtering down your experiences and distilling your experience to tailor it to their response. So then if it's a question about networking because they're scared of it and they want to develop their confidence, I will then frame my answer in a way that will talk about my networking experiences in a more positive light to try and boost their confidence, to reduce their fear. and I'll do so that paints a picture in their mind so they can visualize a networking, 2 or 3 different networking environments, and what goes on there. So when they go in there, they're perhaps a little bit more confident and it's less alien to them. I've tailored my answer towards their requirements. Clarity, motive, and so I suggest that's a great tool to use if you're trying to encourage a person you're mentoring in just to refine their questions in the most effective way. Again, supplementary questions, it's really, really good that they have additional questions. So, oh, tell me a bit more about that. You mentioned that you've been to this event. What was going on there? Tell me about your role there. Did you plan to do this? It's about, I naturally have that because I live, eat, sleep, breathe this, and I have one of those inquisitive minds. But it is not a given, I'll say it again, it's not a given that the mentee will ask those things. So perhaps you need to pepper it with some of the detail and kind of think about what it is they could be asking in your question in order to start generating some response. When they see value in it, then start to share the techniques of how they might do that themselves. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, spirit of inquiry, I talk about it all the time. It's really important that they value the question. Style of mentoring. One of the things that I do on my scheme is I use a piece of theory by a guy called Anthony Hughes, who developed a theory on mentoring a number of years ago, posted it online, and a think tank who I originally set up my scheme with back in 2014 found the theory, liked it, said to me, Andy, use this theory, and we've used it ever since. And basically the idea is Anthony talks about how in his experience, as a guy who works over in America, who's been a range of mentoring stuff, he said that mentors fall into at least one of 5 different styles. The challenger, the cheerleader, the educator, the ideator, and the networker. The challenger's natural style is to get on someone's case, get in their face, give them the tough love in order to get the best out of them. I'm sure each of you have met people like that in your life. Then there's the cheerleader. They're the encourager. Whoa, you're amazing. I believe in you. I'm right behind you. That's my natural style, 100%. I can use other styles, but I like being a cheerleader. Then there's the educator. Sort of person who has information in their mind that wants to pass on that information, almost like filling up an empty vessel with all this good stuff. So what is it they want to educate the mentee on? That teaching style. Then there's the ideator, who is the creative, the visionary, the blue sky thinker. Sort of mentor that would mentor, maybe using unorthodox situations in order to help the person see something. Wants to develop the mentee's ability to be creative. And then finally there's the networker. Networker is the collaborator, wants to get the mentee mixing up with different people, wants to develop their online presence, their LinkedIn, in order that they will be better connected. 5 different mentoring styles that we use. And that's quite useful for us because we ask the mentee to think about what style they would value, and we ask the mentor to think about what style they are, and we try and match people partly on that basis. So it's worth thinking, if you're going to mentor someone, what is your style? The reason why we do that in the schemes, we don't want to clash of personalities. You know, so I think of interior design students at DMU who do these amazing creations and they get just ripped apart by their academics. And not because academics are mean, but they have to be ruthless because of the nature of it. And when I've worked with interior design students, they link them up to interior design mentors. They're like, do not give me a challenger. I am done with being challenged. I want to be encouraged. I get enough challenging in my lectures. So it's worth thinking about your mentoring style and trying to read another person's style and what it is that they want. So what you don't want is a clash of personalities. Really important to identify that because, you know, on paper you could be amazing, but I'm sure you've met with people in life that you just clash with, just not being your cup of tea. So it's worth thinking about and managing your style, or maybe just changing styles. You've got the ability to identify with a range of mentoring styles, play them in different contexts and different environments. So have a think about these things. What's your style? Does it change in the context? Do you have a natural style? Again, if you want to talk to me about these things, we can have a discussion afterwards on LinkedIn or wherever. And tell you more about our model, maybe do some research in some other models. Always keen to learn more. What is your natural and mentoring style? What style do you breathe, Andy? Goodness me, I'm dry. How can mentoring make a difference? So there's a range of different benefits for yourself. For me, it's really useful because it has helped me to look back on my prior experiences and frame them in a different way. Perhaps when I'm recounting a story with mentees, when I'm talking to them about stuff. Perhaps there's some new learning that I have when I'm telling them about that story, that I see things a different way, about that kind of fresh perspective. I give people an analogy. When I'm first introducing the topic of mentoring, I didn't do it at the start of this presentation, but I liken mentoring to, when I talk about our students, I say to them, imagine yourself sitting on a pebbled beach somewhere. and the waves are lapping up in front of you, and you look out at sea, and there is a foreign land across the ocean. You can't see it, it's beyond the horizon. There's foreign land. Now, the land that you're on right now represents university, and that foreign land is the world of work. That's industry. You're leaving here, you're going to go to that land. But because you've never been there, you've never worked in that land, you might have heard certain rumours. How do you know what it's going to be like? So mentoring is like this wonderful person who appears over the horizon and sails on a boat and lands on the shore next to you, jumps out the boat, plonks himself down the beach next to you and says, I live there. I know the land. I know the people. I know the places. I know the customs. I know where to go, where not to go. I know what to eat. I know that land. In other words, they know the world of work. They understand the politics, the culture. They know how to play the game. They understand how ruthless industry can be. They know the best ways to navigate a career path based on their own experience. So they've been there. So what that person does, so we'll sit with you on the beach for a little while. I'm going to tell you all about it. But actually, at some point, we're going to hop in a boat. We're going to hop in the boat and we're going to sail there together. And of course, a boat never really sails in one direct line, does it? It can meander slightly because mentoring is very much a journey, not just about getting to a destination, it's the journey along the way. Now, as you talk on the boat, the mentee will talk to the mentor and they'll say, oh, I'm really excited about this land, or I'm really apprehensive. And what the mentor gets to see is how it is for that person approaching that land. It's like, oh gosh, yeah, I remember those emotions. I remember what it used to be like, and now I'm seeing it through your eyes again, and I take it for granted. So actually, this notion of that fresh perspective, seeing it from the mentee's point of view, can bring back all sorts of emotions, demonstrate how far you've travelled. Maybe there's some stuff that you haven't actually dealt with, stuff that perhaps you need to revisit. It's that new perspective on yourself that mentoring can provide by talking to a person who's just about to experience what you've experienced. Ability to diversify and develop people whose career paths are different to yours. Gosh, I remember 2011, I volunteered over at Business Enterprise Development in Birmingham, helping young people set up their own businesses. So I'm an ex-youth worker, so I know about young people. I've recently set up my own business, and the first person I was given to a mentor was a girl called Jade, and she was setting up a fashion business, her own fashion line. Clearly, I know nothing about fashion, but I didn't need to know about fashion because she was the fashion expert. The thing that I helped her with was actually burying some demons and some ghosts from the past and things that had held her back because she used to work in London and she had like a devil wears Prada type of boss, if you know the sort of person, who really killed her confidence. So I did a lot of mentoring with her on how I dealt with my self-confidence in the past. I didn't need to teach her about fashion. Thank goodness I didn't need to teach her about fashion. I was there to help her with her confidence as an individual. So for me, just because you don't have to be from the same background or same industry for someone else in order to mentor them. And being able to mentor people from different backgrounds, yours and that, will diversify your abilities and your talents and your viewpoints. Great for leadership, great for management, great for awareness, and for improved self-worth. I promise you, my self-worth has rocketed as a consequence of running a mentoring scheme, which has afforded me the opportunity to talk to great mentors. Some of them are online today to learn those people, mentor students. It's been wonderful for myself. Mentoring is an amazing tool and it is highly, highly underrated. Communication skills, self-confidence, sure you get the picture. So, we are nearing the finishing point now. So on that basis, from the very start of the presentation, talking about defining mentoring, looking at particular tools of how the world of work and employability relates to mentoring itself, looking at the value of mentoring, some of the skills involved, the role of a mentor, role of mentee, how you approach a session, the preparations, techniques involved in the session, what goes on in your mind as a mentor, all those things that we've talked about in this. What's the time now? I've lost the sense of time. It's absolutely fine. Probably about an hour and a half now. I'm like, yes. As a consequence of that, I hope that this session would help you if you're thinking about getting involved in mentoring, maybe actively involved in mentoring and want to improve that, or looking particularly at your own practice. So I want to ask you, and in a short while's time, perhaps the microphones will come on maybe in a slide or two. I wonder, has this session provided that non-judgmental space for today? That opportunity for you to listen more about mentoring, perhaps reflect on your own style as I've posed you some questions. Have we provided that? In relation to what our aims were, to improve the understanding of what mentoring is, do you think you understand mentoring even a bit more, perhaps a lot more now? Has that improvement taken place? Is that better? But perhaps from listening to the tools and the approaches and the way that I've structured my thoughts and feelings, how I deliver good mentoring, has that been of use? Has that helped you to develop your own mentoring practice? Has your understanding improved? And do you now have the tools and the practice to use it?
I found that really helpful, Andy.
Okay.
Really enjoyed it. I thought a lot of it is almost quite, this sounds as though like I'm putting you down, but I'm not at all. It's a lot of it sort of common sense.
Yep.
But you need to be reminded of it, because of course you get into the world of work and you're doing what you're doing, and often sometimes common sense gets forgotten.
It can be all very automatic, you know.
Yeah.
Mentoring is storytelling. We tell stories all the time, but it's taking something and it's refining it and it's turning into a skill, and we can sharpen our abilities as mentors. The things that we look for, the way that we frame information, the speed by which we filter the experiences in our mind and convey them. And if we get that right, they're going to come back for more. But if they don't, and we share some kind of vague anecdotes which may or may not have, would they come back? Probably not. They probably wouldn't ask any more questions. So it's these abilities that we should refine in order to ensure that if we want to mentor, our audience will come back.
I really liked the bedroom analogy.
Yeah.
I was a typical teenager. You know, I mean, when I say typical, I'm going to say on the verge of disgusting. And now I'm like the extreme opposite, where like everything has a home, it's labelled, and like I'm so organised. And I think to myself, if like my house is a mess, I feel like my mind is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But as a teenager, I didn't feel that way. I didn't see that. I just saw it as a mess, and I still felt together. So I think sometimes it's recognising different points in your lives. So as an adult and someone who's now gone through this process, I look at as a teenager's bedroom as a mess. I think as a mentor, you would have to kind of see it through their eyes and see that's how they're organised in their own creative / disorganised space.
Yes, indeed. I could show you my daughter's bedroom now, but I think there's a wild animal in there. I'd be hesitant to go in there. I think for yourself, Rebecca, then, what might be interesting, just as an example of you with your mentoring technique, then, there was a period of time when you didn't care about your room. There was a period of time when you did care about your room, and that period of time when you did care, you attached the value that said, actually, tidy mind, tidy room, and they kind of go hand in hand. So there was a shift in your mind, and there's a value placed on having a tidy room. And for me, there would have been either a key moment where something changed, or that would have transitioned over a period of time where there was a growing awareness. So if you mentor people in the future and they talk about being disorganised, one of the ways that you could talk to them is saying, I went through a process of actually physically changing my room environment to become more organised, and how you explain that transition and what you did and what worked for you in sequence will be a useful tool to say, okay, that's what I did. Could you make that work for you? And that could be a very powerful tool and a symbolic gesture to a mentee of, okay, so if I change that space, what does that say about my mindset and willingness to commit to action? So you've got some gold there. You've got some great stuff to share there. It's about how you then translate it in your own unique way.
Brilliant.
I think just building on from that, Andy, I mean, obviously some of the mentoring that I've done as part of your employability scheme, the slide that talks a little bit about some of the students struggling to know what questions to ask is really probably my biggest frustration with it. I think, and linking into Rebecca's last point, I try to use I guess, getting them to give me some ideas in advance what it is they want to cover and why, so that I can prepare myself, but also to make sure that they come to the session knowing what they're trying to get out of it as well. Because I tend to find otherwise they'll come with an idea of a topic, so it might be LinkedIn, just off the top of my head. and when you ask them, well, what is it you're struggling on? What is it that you're keen to understand? You know, why are you interested in this? They actually don't necessarily know. They just think that they do need to ask questions, but then the questions are incredibly superficial. And it's quite, I find it, probably my own style, I find it quite difficult to not then lead the discussion on LinkedIn. And because they don't know necessarily what questions to ask, only that they just want to learn something about it. But because they don't know... Go on.
That becomes less of a dialogue then, doesn't it? And it almost comes a bit, almost like presentation-esque. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that I'll use 10 words when one would do, as my natural style anyway, which I think really creates for me that frustration that I think some of the time they don't know what they need to know, and that's obviously part of the session. But trying to tease that out of them, I find you end up, I find I end up leading them too much, maybe. And I think that's one of the challenges that I find with it, that they're not coming to those sessions with a real deep understanding of what do they need to know, what research have they already done, what have they already gone and done. And not all of them, but I think probably the majority of the students that I've mentored over the last 6 years do fit that category.
Yeah.
Yes,
it can be a frustration. And sometimes there's things we can do that can try and help generate the conversation for us to assess where they're at. So I've got a good colleague at DMU called Jason Eyre, and he told me about an academic who had created a theory. I can't remember her name, it's not mine, it's not Jason's, but she talked about something called the Triad of Understanding. How I see myself, how I see the world, and how the world sees me. And I think as a useful starting point, if you've got someone who might be struggling to ask questions, you might say to them, how do you see yourself then in relation to the world of work? How do you see the world of work, and how do you think the world of work sees you? Because that could generate all sorts of comments about self-worth, lack of skills, amazing potential, or whatever. So, well, tell me more about that. And then as you learn more about them, then you can try and flip that into mentoring and start to fill in some leg out and saying, do you have any experience in that? No? Okay, let me tell you about my experience. So the way of kind of controlling the conversation by asking some key questions. But in an ideal world, I'd like to think that they would come with the questions to you. But I hear you, Steve, because I know you've had some amazing students that you've mentored who have been great with their questions, and others where it has been a challenge.
And I just think an observation more than a question, really. Seeing different levels of motivation in mentees just makes you realise that we can do so much as mentors, but it's also really important that mentees want to be mentored in the first place. It's really difficult to work with someone who doesn't want to be mentored or doesn't understand the value that you bring to the table. And it's so important that they learn that. And gone are the days where, for example, supervisors or mentors or whatever we want to call them would be in little glass rooms, and you would be so scared to knock on the door, or you have to book an appointment to even get time with someone. So in today's modern world of accessibility, we can be so accessible now. And it's so important that mentees realize that there's so much value in that and embrace it and really value it. And I just think it's a two-way process. And I do think mentees need to understand how much we bring to the table and how much support they can get.
This is it, yeah. For me, there's a phrase I use, and motive is everything. Motive is everything. And if there is no motive for mentor and the mentees, no motive to get involved in mentoring from the mentee's point of view, then it's dead in the water. There's no point. They have to have a motive. Now, that motive might change over a period of time. They might come hungry for a specific piece of information, but once they start to understand what a mentoring relationship is about and the things that they can get from that, you know, from the support and the empathy and all those things, it could be the first time that person has met with a professional who has not judged them, who has accepted them for exactly who they are at exactly that point in their life. There'll be no exam at the end. There'll be no test at the end. It's a case of saying, okay, I've joined with you at this point in the journey. We're going to wander together. We're going to meander together. We're going to talk about things as we go. And at some point we may separate off, or we may come back together again. but I'm not going to judge you for your understanding of what you do and don't know. So someone may come along thinking, I want some answers to some questions, but what they might find is a relationship that's really positive, it's really beneficial to them, which unearths their mind, which encourages them to want to mentor someone else. So that motivation will change. But if the motive is not there in the first place, if that is not clear and not communicated, is not identified, then for me it's going nowhere fast. I'll hand over to Bushra at the end, because this is her initiative. There's a colossal amount of work, most of which I'm probably not even aware of. But this is one session out of many, which is a fraction of a wider range of work that Bushra does. So perhaps there'll be a little pitch at the end from you, Bushra. You maybe can talk a little bit about that for the people that perhaps don't know. I would encourage anyone here, so my kind of closing remarks is to, sorry, my final screen, my last image. I've lost my cursor, what's going on? There you go. I want to say thank you for coming on to the session, and I encourage all of you, get involved in mentoring, because it's great for your awareness, it's great for self-validation of your experiences, it's great experience on your CV saying, you know, I help other people out of choice rather than being forced to do that. You can learn and grow in ways that you haven't anticipated before, and seeing someone else develop and take your life experience and your journey and adapt it in a way that works for them and carries it on, you know, that's a legacy thing. That's a legacy thing. And I'd like to believe that, you know, long after I've shuffled off this planet, some of the messages that I've passed on to people will still be being passed on to people, and the value of my experience. So what I have toiled in continues to see benefit for someone else. And I believe that's the case for anyone who wants to get involved in mentoring. But there's mentoring and there's good mentoring. And this session was all about identifying what good mentoring looks like and how one actually delivers it. All you've had is my perspective, how I see it and how I do it. I hope you take something of value away from it, but equally, I won't be offended if you throw the whole lot in the bin on the way out, because that's what mentoring's about. You don't have to do what I say. Thank you to each of you for your contributions. It's been a pleasure talking to you this afternoon, and I'd like to hand back to Bushra now to close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. That's been fabulous. It's been a long overdue session, but really, really worth it. I, for one, have got quite a lot out of that session. So thank you so much for sharing your pearls of wisdom. The Bushra Ali Group has got various arms, and I will just end by saying really that the birth of the group was really to not focus so much on networking. There is a lot of that out there, and yes, there is Network to Connect under the Bushra Ali Group, but more importantly, to really look at bringing issues that matter to the community to the forefront and talking about things that often people don't talk about, and there are so many of them. And we've been able to run great sessions, and there are plenty of things coming up. So just to be aware, next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, we've got Recognizing Our Emotions, the Importance of Self-Care and Mental Health, being run by Susie Wellstead. If you want the link, please do book on. I think that is, especially in this climate, it's so, so important to remember to care for ourselves also. Things coming up in the future, please keep an eye out. We're going to have on the Empowered Women, Empowering Women arm, we've got the Women in Leadership debate discussion, which was happening in June, but due to the current social distancing situation, decided to postpone to next year, which is now going to be on the 9th of March. We've also got things upcoming, possibly virtual, including cultural competency training, and that date will be released soon, as well as the unconscious bias. So really remembering the diversity arm and looking at inclusion, social mobility. There's going to be one session being run with 2 junior lawyers talking about their not so normal journey into law, and this point of making, addressing this idea of being a certain colour, of a certain university, of a certain background to be able to get into certain careers. So making sure we continue to address all the issues that matter. Likewise, any ideas that you would like to see sessions run on, please do get in touch with me. If there is something that you yourself would like to run a session on and share your experience and wisdom, please do get in touch also. I really hope you've all found value in the session tonight. Thank you for giving up your evening for this, and I would just like to wish you all the best. Thank you very much.